It's far from a secret at this point that budgets for AAA games have skyrocketed. You know, we've had stories in the last few years of, for example, the Tomb Raider reboot, obviously the first one, not Rise of the Tomb Raider, having done really, really well and sold over 6 million copies in a certain time period, and Square basically said, that's not good enough. And, well, you could argue that if 6 million sales is not good enough, then you've got an overspending problem. And obviously, budgets are just continuing to rise for the very top tier of AAA games. As obviously, you've got just so many people working on these huge products that have got to have the cutting edge technology and graphics and everything else as well, you know, voice acting and all this other stuff. You know, you're ending up multi-million-dollar projects, and we've got some comments here from Cliffy B, who of course is now head of Boss Key Productions, but obviously best known for creating Gears of War, one of the most AAA of AAAs. Now, he spoke at Reboot Develop today, which is a conference, obviously, and very much attended by developers, and basically said that blockbuster games, meaning of course AAA, are in a really, really weird spot, to use his phrasing. And he had some very interesting comments, and obviously, although he isn't involved in that particular scene anymore, he obviously was involved within it for numerous years, so it's a very interesting perspective I think that he has. But he said, quote, AAA is starting to feel like the American restaurant scene. They're not bad, they're not great, they're just there. Now, obviously, he's referring to, you know, if you go to any major city, you could expect the same brands to pop up if you're looking for a place to grab a bite to eat. Like, if you just want a quick lunch, you're not fussy, you know, you're probably going to go to your Subway or whatever. These brands you can find pretty much in any major city, and even just some small towns will probably be there as well. And he's saying that it's kind of the similar thing with AAA, that we've got a category, again in quotes, of 8 games that are getting repeated over and over again. He then actually was so bold as to bring up some examples. For example, Call of Duty, Uncharted 4, and he said they're great games, but of course they cost hundreds of millions of dollars to produce, and obviously the marketing. Now, oftentimes it is the marketing that really causes these budgets to balloon into crazy territory. Obviously the game in itself is very expensive to make, but when you throw in, you know, billboards and on the side of a bus and TV ads and YouTube ads and ads on websites and maybe even some sponsored content on YouTube or Twitch or whatever, the bill starts to rack up pretty damn high. So this obviously means that many people are nervous to take a risk. You know, a new IP, an unknown name that customers don't know, that you're going to have to convince them to buy, is obviously a bit more of a hard sell, because, you know, when you're saying, okay, I want you to spend multiple millions of dollars, it's obviously the safer bet of like Call of Duty or whatever, just for example, is going to be preferable. And obviously $60 is quite expensive for a person. Obviously a lot of people, many people I would say, can really only afford a few game purchases a year. Most people don't buy every game that comes out as they come out. You know, they might get some on sale after a few months or even a couple of years. You know, for example, back when I was in university, my fairly impressive collection of PS2 games, and obviously as expanded into Xbox 360 as well, pretty much 100% of those games are pre-owned. I think there's only one PS2 game I bought on launch, and that was actually Okami. The rest are all pre-owned because, like, it's just too expensive to buy at launch and that sort of thing. So you kind of get where I'm going with this. A lot of people will either wait for a sale, get it pre-owned, or whatever. And Cliffy said that, quote, this is a nearly unsustainable model unless you're an Activision, 2K, or Sony. Now, he is basically advising that developers go for the sort of middle ground between indie and AAA, which he called AA. And this basically means that you've got games like your Warframe, Rocket League, Rust, games of that nature where they've clearly had a budget. They're not a game made by 5 guys in someone's basement on a budget of ramen noodles and pure sheer will. It was a reasonably sized team with a reasonable budget, and it was still, you know, probably the bill would make your hair turn white, but it would be more reasonable and more sustainable than a full-blown AAA multi-million-dollar project, and obviously you could probably charge a bit less for it then as well. And obviously he made the very good point that, again, going back to the new IP thing, it is a very difficult sell for new IP, because not only do you have the risk of, okay, this is an unknown name in the gaming space, you know, do we have a big name studio attached to it? Obviously that does help. If you say, oh, you know, for example, Hideo Kojima's game, Death Stranding, that's obviously going to do well because it's Hideo Kojima, so you get my point. Or if it's a big studio like, Remedy with Quantum Break, for example. But even then, it's a risk. And it's not just, will we make our money back? It's, you know, if it fails, then particular IP is just dead. So, you know, we've killed any future prospects with it as well. So, with a new IP, the key thing is marketing, obviously. And if you don't have enough marketing budget, then you're probably not going to sell enough copies, and you kind of get where I'm going with this. Though this is why we see more innovation in the indie gaming, or AA, to use Cliffy's phrase, section of the market, because in that particular section a risk is more, you know, it's more palpable to you. It's, excuse me, not palpable, I meant palatable, that's the word I was looking for there. But you get my point. Like, obviously an indie studio could very much be brought down after its first game if it doesn't do well, but it still is better for them to take a risk and go for some weird and crazy idea that makes their game stand out than it is to go for the, you know, brown shooter or whatever of the current month or current year. And to be honest, AAA is very precarious. You know, the budgets are just continuing to rise, and to be honest, I think there's a certain point where they either have to stop, or it's just going to collapse in on itself. We won't get a collapse like we had way back in the day, because, well, the situation here is not as it was then. Even if AAA has a huge crash and the bubble bursts or whatever, indie gaming and the sort of middle ground AA guys are still going to be fine, but the big studios are going to be the ones at risk. And I definitely think there's some serious revisions need to be made in the AAA space, because we're not just talking about ballooning budgets here, we're also talking about the, you know, the crunch and stuff like that. The fact that developers are not even seeing their own families for, you know, a couple of weeks at a time because the hours are so crazy, and other stuff like this. You know, the games that we know and love, and obviously I enjoy a AAA game just as much as the next person, you know, still working my way through Horizon, obviously got Nier on my list as well, a bunch of other games that I want to play that are very much AAA, but I'm obviously very aware of the fact that the model that created those games that we all love needs fixing. Just because it produces great games doesn't mean there aren't inherent problems with it that might actually cause some major problems, and might even cause it to change in a bad way if we don't kind of act ahead of those problems, I guess I'm saying. So, yeah. I've kind of rambled on a bit here, but I feel like this is a discussion that's worth having. In fact, I'm probably going to be doing another video on this, a more sort of critical, deep look at the industry and how we could fix it, you know, what perhaps is causing these problems, that sort of thing. I have no timeline for this because, you know, it's a lot of work and we already have a lot of stuff lined up as well. Obviously, I am taking most of the responsibility at the moment for reasons that will be obvious to long-term viewers. So at some point I will get to this topic because it is something that I find interesting. You know, AAA is something that is a big part of our industry, and we definitely need to be working to improve the situation there, which is a tad precarious at times. However, I want to hear some thoughts and opinions from you guys in the comments. Your support is always appreciated. So, let me know your thoughts, and I'll see you next time. Thanks for watching.